There are more pyramids in Sudan than in Egypt, more than 200 of them, standing silent, ignored. For centuries, the world has been told a single story about ancient Egypt: pharaohs, golden masks, the Nile. But what if I told you that for nearly 100 years, the most powerful civilization on earth was not ruled from Cairo? It was ruled from deep inside the heart of Africa. What if I told you that the men who wore the double crown, who commanded armies from the Mediterranean to the tropical south, were black African kings? And what if I told you that this story was deliberately buried, erased from textbooks, hidden in museum basements, chipped off ancient walls? This is not a conspiracy. This is archaeology. This is the truth. And today we reclaim the story of Africa's Black Pharaohs. If you are ready to stop learning the version of history they forced on you and start discovering the truth about your ancestors, hit that subscribe button right now. Join the movement at the Untold Histories TV, because once you see the truth, you can never look at the world the same way again. To understand the Black Pharaohs, you must first understand where they came from. South of Egypt, along the upper reaches of the Nile, lay one of the most sophisticated civilizations in human history. The Greeks called it Ethiopia, the land of the burnt faces. The Egyptians called it Ta-Seti, the land of the bow. Today we know it as the ancient kingdom of Kush. For thousands of years, Kush and Egypt were locked in a complex dance of rivalry and respect. Egypt looked south for gold, incense, and ivory, but Kush was never just a resource for Egypt. While the northern kingdom was building the Great Pyramids of Giza, the Kushites were developing a culture that was older, deeper, and in many ways more resilient. Here is what the textbooks rarely tell you. Kush was not a lesser civilization imitating its northern neighbor. They had their own unique writing, the Meroitic script, which remains one of the great undeciphered mysteries of the ancient world. They had their own gods, like the lion-headed warrior god, Apedemak, and they had a mastery of something that would eventually change the face of warfare forever: iron. While much of the world was still struggling with bronze, the Kushites had turned the city of Meroe into the Birmingham of Africa. If you visit the ruins of Meroe today, you won't just see temples. You will see massive black slag heaps. These are the remnants of a giant industrial machine. The Kushites mastered the high-heat forge, producing iron weapons that were stronger and more durable than anything the Egyptians or the Greeks possessed at the time. They didn't just have better archers. They had an industrial advantage that gave them the edge in every conflict. This wasn't just a kingdom, it was a superpower. By the 8th century BC, Egypt was a shadow of its former self. The great empire of the Ramses era had fractured into small, warring chiefdoms. The temples were falling into disrepair. The sacred traditions of the Nile were being forgotten as foreign influences crept in from the east. To the Kushites in the south, this was a tragedy. They didn't see Egypt as an enemy to be destroyed. They saw it as a sacred land that had lost its way. In 744 BC, the Kushite king Paye made his move. He didn't march north for gold or slaves. He marched north to save the soul of the Nile. His army swept through Egypt like a force of nature. But Pi was a different kind of conqueror. He was a holy warrior. He forbade his soldiers from looting. He ordered them to wash in the Nile before entering sacred cities. When he reached the ancient capital of Memphis, he found the harbor locked and the walls high. The Egyptians thought they were safe. Paye didn't waste time with a months-long siege. He displayed a military genius that would have made Napoleon envious. He realized the river was his greatest ally. He ordered his men to seize every boat in the harbor, lash them together to create a massive floating platform, and scaled the city walls in a single night of lightning-fast action. When Memphis fell, the rest of Egypt trembled. Paye had done the impossible. He had unified the entire Nile Valley. He established the 25th dynasty, the Nubian dynasty. For the first time, one African empire stretched from the Mediterranean coast to the tropical depths of the south. One crown, two kingdoms, one African destiny. At the heart of this new empire sat Gebel Barkal, the holy mountain. To the Kushites, this strange, flat-topped mountain in modern-day Sudan wasn't just a landmark, it was the literal home of the god Amun. This was their Vatican, their Mecca. This is where their kings were crowned to prove their divine right to rule. While the world looked to Giza, the Black Pharaohs were building a spiritual powerhouse in the south. They carved temples directly into the solid rock of the mountain. They raised giant statues of themselves that reached toward the heavens, asserting their presence as the rightful guardians of the Nile. To the Kushites, power didn't come from imitating Egypt. It came from returning to the African soil where the gods were born. But the greatest of all the Black Pharaohs was Taharka. If there is one name from African history you must remember, it is his. Under Taharka's reign, the empire experienced a cultural and architectural renaissance. He didn't just maintain the temples, he expanded them on a scale not seen since the days of the New Kingdom. He was a builder, a diplomat, and a warrior. But a storm was gathering in the east that would test his greatness to the limit: the Assyrians. They were the most feared military machine the ancient world had ever seen. They were known for their brutality, their psychological warfare, and their iron chariot divisions. They had already crushed the kingdoms of the Levant and were setting their sights on the riches of Egypt. This is the part of history they never teach you in Western schools. In the Bible, specifically in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 19, there is a reference to a king called Tirhaka, the king of Cush. That is Taharka. When the Assyrians were on the verge of wiping Jerusalem off the map, it was Taharka and his Black African army that marched out to confront them. Think about that for a moment. The Black Pharaoh of Africa is a central figure in the biblical narrative. He was the only man on earth strong enough to stand between the world's most feared empire and total destruction. He saved the city of Jerusalem and preserved a lineage that would shape world history. Most people sitting in church today have never been told who Tirhaka really was. Why do you think his story was left out? Was it an accident, or was it a deliberate attempt to erase the image of a powerful black savior? Tell me your theory in the comments right now. The Kushite spirit did not break when the 25th dynasty eventually retreated to the south. In fact, it grew stronger. Centuries later, a new predator arrived: the Roman Empire. Most people know about Cleopatra, but few know about the woman who actually defeated Rome, Queen Amanirenas. She was a Kandake, a warrior queen of Meroe. She was a one-eyed general who led her armies from the front, a woman of such ferocity that the Roman legions, who had conquered most of the known world, found themselves in a stalemate. When the Romans pushed into Kushite territory, Amanirenas didn't wait for a treaty. She struck first. She led her soldiers into Roman-occupied Egypt, captured 3 major cities, and toppled the statues of Caesar. In the ultimate act of defiance, her soldiers decapitated a bronze statue of Augustus Caesar and carried the head back to Meroe. They didn't put it in a museum. They buried it beneath the entrance to her palace. For 2,000 years, every time the queen or her subjects entered that building, they literally walked over the head of the most powerful man in Rome. Kush never broke. They were one of the few civilizations that the Roman Empire realized they simply could not conquer. So why don't we know these names? Why are these stories missing from the curriculum in the US, the UK, and Canada? In the 1800s, European archaeologists arrived in Sudan. They saw the pyramids, the ironworks, and the sophisticated temples. But they had a problem. Their worldview was built on the idea that Africa was a dark continent without history. They couldn't accept that a powerful Black African civilization had once ruled the cradle of civilization. So they minimized it. They called it secondary to Egypt. They relabeled the artifacts. In 1834, an Italian explorer named Giuseppe Ferlini did something unforgivable. He discovered the pyramid of Queen Amani-Sheketo. Instead of excavating it, he blew the top off with dynamite just to get to the golden side. He then went on to destroy the tops of dozens of other Sudanese pyramids. This wasn't just looting, it was the physical erasure of a legacy. But the truth is a stubborn thing. Today, modern DNA analysis and satellite imaging are proving what the soil has known for millennia. These were not forgotten people. They were kings, queens, engineers, and protectors. They were the men and women who faced down Rome, who saved Jerusalem, and who reminded Egypt of its own greatness. Pie, Shabaka, Taharka, Amanarenas. These are not just names in a dusty book. These are your ancestors. They built more pyramids than Egypt ever did, and they did it with a spirit of defiance that still flows through our veins today. Subscribe to Untold Histories TV because the stories they don't teach you in school are the ones that change everything. Drop a crown emoji in the comments if you believe this history belongs to the world.